Scandinavian Aero Industries was a Danish manufacturer of aeroplanes that existed between 1937 and 1954. The company was founded by technician Viggo Kramme and engineer Carl Gustav Sultan and based in Copenhagen. The company's airplanes were labeled KC for Kramme and Sultan. Post-war sales never reached the company's expectations, and production turned unprofitable in the early 1950s, driving the company to shut down. In total, about 200 planes were built by the company. Let's talk about it. Anyway, before this video starts, I just want to say that I'm not good at talking fast in English. So if I'm sloppy with some words, say them a bit slower, or maybe just say them incorrectly, I'm sorry in advance. The first plane that was made by Scandinavian Aero Industries was called the KC-1. The Scandinavian Aero Industries KC-1 was a sport aircraft built in Denmark in 1937. The KC-1 was a low-wing cantilever monoplane of conventional design with fixed tailwheel undercarriage and an open cockpit with a single seat. Construction throughout was of wood. Only a single KC-1 was constructed, and it disappeared during the course of World War II. During the 70s, a flying replica was built with work started by Gunnar Fjord Christiansen in 1972 and sold to the Danish Airplane Museum in 1977. The completed aircraft, powered by a more powerful but heavier 50 horsepower 1.5 liter Volkswagen flat 4 engine, flew for the first time on the 20th of November 1988 and in 2008 remains part of the museum's collection. It had a wingspan of 7.2 meters and a wing area of 8.4 square meters. It had an empty weight of 192 kilograms and a gross weight of 325 kilograms. Its original powerplane was a single ABC Scorpion 2-cylinder air-cooled 35 horsepower horizontally opposed piston engine. It had a two-bladed fixed pitch propeller. It had a max speed of 79 knots and a landing speed of 32 knots. It also had a cruise speed of 86 knots. It had a max altitude of 16,000 feet and a crew of 1. Next came the KC-2. The Scandinavian Aero Industries KC-2 was a sport aircraft built in Denmark in 1937, produced in 3 major versions before and after the Second World War. In its original form, designated the Cube, was a low-wing cantilever monoplane of conventional design with fixed tailwheel undercarriage and 2 seats side by side under an enclosed canopy. The fuselage structure was of steel tube skinned in plywood and fabric, and the wings were wooden with plywood covering and could be folded back along the fuselage for transport and storage. This was followed by the aerobatic Scandinavian Aero Industries KC-2 Sport, with a revised fuselage design, placing the 2 seats in separate open cockpits in tandem, and a dedicated military trainer version along the same lines, the Scandinavian Aero Industries KC-2 Trainer. This later type was first produced in 1946 as a step towards rebuilding Denmark's air force after the war. They remained in service until 1955, when 9 examples were sold into private hands. In 2008, an example of each variant is preserved in the Danish Airplane Museum. It had a length of 7.6 meters, a wingspan of 10.2 meters and a height of 2.1 meters. It had a wing area of 15 square meters. It had an empty weight of 550 kilograms and a gross weight of 850 kilograms. It had a fuel capacity of 110 liters in 2 tanks in the wing center section. Its power land was a single de Havilland Gypsy Major 1 4-cylinder inverted air-cooled inline piston engine with 145 horsepower. Its propeller was a two-bladed wooden fixed-pitch air screw with a 2-meter diameter. It had a max speed of 127 knots and a stall speed of 40 knots. It had a never exceed speed of 190 knots. It had a max range of 500 kilometers and it had a max altitude of 16,000 feet. It had a rate of climb of 885 feet per minute and it had a takeoff run of 319 feet and a landing run of 430 feet and a crew of 2. Next was the KC-1 glider. In the early 1940s there was a great need among Danish gliders to find a one-seat school glider that could replace the outdated German Sogling and SG-38 types for basic training. The aircraft had to be simple enough that it could be built in the many gliding clubs that emerged during the war. The desire for a unit type was fueled when, in 1942, the Tuborg Foundation entered into financing the construction and building of 2 such school gliders, one at Polyteknisk Flyggruppe and another at Scandinavian Aero Industries. After testing the types in September of 1943, the choice fell in favor of the Fotage 1. For this reason, only the prototype of the Scandinavian Aero Industries' first and only school glider, the KC-1, was built. The aircraft was registered as OY54, later OYASX. The KC-1 had an empty weight of 100 kilograms. Next came the Scandinavian Aero Industries KC-3. The Scandinavian Aero Industries KC-3 Lærke was a Danish light utility aircraft used by the Danish Air Ambulance Service and Danish Air Force. The first KC-3 was built during the German occupation of Denmark and first flew on the 11th of September 1944. With German permission, it was transferred to the rescue service. A second wartime example was smuggled to Sweden. The 2 wartime aircraft had a 19 horsepower Gypsy Major 1 engine. The KC-3 had a high wing braced by V-struts to the lower fuselage. Its fuselage had a steel tube structure and, like the rest of the aircraft, had fabric covering. Its 2 front seats shared dual controls. 64 were built post-war with a 100 horsepower Blackburn Cirrus Minor 2 4-cylinder inverted air-cooled inline piston engine. Many of these went to flying clubs, mostly in Denmark, but with sales to several nearby countries. A few went further, one to Singapore and another to India, where its airframe still survives. It had a length of 6.6 meters, a wingspan of 9.6 meters, and a height of 2.1 meters. It had a wing area of 13 square meters. It had an empty weight of 368 kilograms and a max weight of 706 kilograms. It had a fuel capacity of 68.2 liters. It had a two-bladed weighbridge 1.9 meter diameter wooden fixed pitch propeller. It had a max speed of 100 knots and a cruise speed of 92 knots. It had a landing speed of 30 knots. It had a range of 500 kilometers. It had a max altitude of 13,501 feet. It had a rate of climb of 700 feet per minute. It had a takeoff run of 230 feet and a landing run of 160 feet. Next came the Scandinavian Aero Industries KC, and I think that says 4, but I'm not sure because it's written in Roman numerals, so I think it says 4. The Scandinavian Aero Industries KC-4 was a light twin-engined aircraft first built in Denmark in 1944 for use as an air ambulance. It was a conventional low-wing cantilever monoplane with twin tails mounted on the ends of the horizontal stabilizer. Power was provided by two engines mounted in nacelles in the wings that also housed the main units of the fixed tailwheel undercarriage. The cabin could hold 2 stretchers, 2 medical attendants, and a flight crew of 2. A single machine registered OYDIC was built during the war, with a second aircraft registered as OYDCU being built and flown in 1949. That same year, the OYDIC was christened with the name Folke Bernadotte in honor of the Swedish count who had used this very aircraft to make a diplomatic visit to Germany to negotiate for the release of Danish prisoners in German concentration camps near the end of the war. This aircraft is now the flagship of the Danish Aircraft Museum collection, having been restored to its original wartime configuration and markings following a career as a utility aircraft in England and a crash in 1979. The second aircraft was actively operational until the mid-1960s. It had a capacity of 2 I've already said this, but yeah, I don't know why, but I wrote that 2 times. It had a length of 9.8 meters, a wingspan of 16 meters, and a height of 2.45 meters. It had a wing area of 30 square meters. It had an empty weight of 1,200 kilograms and a gross weight of 2,000 kilograms. It had a fuel capacity of 240 liters. Its power plant was 2 de Havilland Gypsy Major 4-cylinder inverted inline air-cooled piston engines with 130 horsepower each. It had a 2-bladed fixed-pitch wooden propeller. It had a max speed of 116 knots and a cruise speed of 110 knots. It had a landing speed of 40 knots. It had a range of 900 kilometers. It had a takeoff run of 460 feet and a landing run of 230 feet. It also had a crew of 2. Anyways, if you're enjoying the video so far, please drop a like and a comment and maybe subscribe. Anyways, back to the video. Next was the KC-5, which I don't actually have any info about other than the fact that it was a twin-engined short-haul airliner, cancelled before a prototype could be built. Next was the Scandinavian Aero Industries KC-7 Lark, was a light utility aircraft built in Denmark shortly after the Second World War, based on the Scandinavian Aero Industries KC-3 air ambulance. The KC-7 was a strut-braced high-wing monoplane of conventional design with an enclosed cabin for 4 seats. 56 aircraft were built and another 22 partially completed aircraft were destroyed in a factory fire in 1947. The Danish Air Force operated 10 of the type as trainers between 1950 and 1977. It had a passenger capacity of 2 passengers. It had a length of 6.56 meters, a wingspan of 9.6 meters, and a height of 2.1 meters. It had a wing area of 13 square meters. It had an empty weight of 464 kilograms and a gross weight of 867 kilograms. It had a fuel capacity of 110 liters. Its power plant was a single Continental C-125 6-cylinder air-cooled, horizontally opposed piston engine with 125 horsepower. It had a 2-bladed 1.9 meter diameter fixed-pitch propeller. It had a max speed of 110 knots and a cruise speed of 100 knots. It had a landing speed of 35 knots. It had a max altitude of 13,501 feet and a rate of climb of 557.7 feet per minute, and a crew of 2. Next was the Scandinavian Aero Industries KC, and I think that says 8. Again, it's Roman numerals, so I don't understand fully what it is, but I think that says 8. The Scandinavian Aero Industries KC-8 was an aerobatic sport aircraft first built in Denmark in 1949. It was a low-wing cantilever monoplane of conventional configuration with a fixed tailwheel undercarriage and a single seat. The first KC-8 was custom built by Scandinavian Aero Industries for the Danish aerobatic display team Silvestiensen Luftcirkus, in which Peter Steen piloted the aircraft in some 50 performances in summer of 1950. At the same time, a full set of parts for a second aircraft was produced, but this was not assembled until 1959. In 1996, another was completed by amateur builder Hardy Watt, powered by a flat 4 engine. It had a length of 5.70 meters, a wingspan of 7.20 meters, and a height of 1.80 meters. It had a wing area of 8.64 square meters. It had an empty weight of 407 kilograms and a gross weight of 650 kilograms. Its power plant was a single de Havilland Gypsy Major 10 air-cooled 4-cylinder inline engine with 145 horsepower. It had a max speed of 148 knots and a max range of 584 kilometers. It also had a rate of climb of 1,575 feet per minute and a crew of 1. The next was the KC Ellehammer, which was a replica of the 1909 Ellehammer plane. Next was the Scandinavian Aero Industries KC-10. The KC-10 was a strut-braced, high-wing, two-seat military observation monoplane developed from the KC-7 with a more powerful 145 horsepower Continental C-145 engine. Deliveries to the Danish army began in 1952, but by the summer of that year 2 had already crashed. The investigations of these crashes, attributed to failure of the wooden rudder, were conducted with technical assistance from Britain's Royal Aircraft Establishment, but no underlying defect in the aircraft design was uncovered. The prototype was modified with a steel-framed rudder as the KC-10 Mk2, but the KC-10 was returned to service. When 2 more crashes took place in 1954, the type was finally withdrawn, then scrapped in 1960, leaving the prototype as the only surviving example. It is now in the Danish Airplane Museum, active again in 2009 after restoration. It had a length of 6.50 meters, a wingspan of 9.41 meters, and a height of 2.20 meters. It had a wing area of 13 square meters. It had an empty weight of 529 kilograms and a gross weight of 860 kilograms. It had a power plant of a single Continental C-145 air-cooled flat 6-piston engine with 145 horsepower. It had a max speed of 160 knots and a range of 800 kilometers. It had a max altitude of 14,400 feet and a crew of 2. And that's all. Thanks for watching. I hope to see you in the next video. Bye.